Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert along with Sports Radio 610 Shaun Bijani for some more Texans draft coverage this weekend. We're going to get into the third round picks in just a bit. But Shaun, you've had a chance to listen to Caserio now, listen to D'Amico Ryan's reaction to the Will Anderson and CJ Stroud picks, and to those guys themselves. What do you think? What did you think about what they had to say?
Well, it was the first time we had a chance to hear from D'Amico, and I think we were all interested to learn of his reaction, whenever the Texans, took Stroud, made the big move up to actually secure Will Anderson. Defensive-minded coach. He gets his cornerstone piece defensively, the big edge rusher, disruptor. He was pumped. I mean, we all saw the picture of him smiling ear to ear, embracing Caserio with a hug. He said he was elated whenever the Texans took Stroud, but he said he was over the moon whenever they took Will Anderson and moved up to do so. Being at the press conference earlier today, getting a chance to see Stroud, see Anderson in person, and their reactions in a room full of complete strangers, being in that environment for the first time with their families in front of them, it was just a very, very cool moment. You put yourself into, at least you try to, into their position. Like, what is that like? Looking back at me with all the cameras and everything going on, and your world has literally just changed, evolved, really, over the course of just the last 16, 18 hours, whatever it had been at that time. You could have been anywhere. You could have been in Carolina. You could have been in Denver. You could have been in Indianapolis, Tennessee. But hey, you're here in Houston, Texas. It's like, I always wonder what these guys think. Like, did I really think I was going to wind up here? And I thought it was interesting. Anderson said, I think he took like maybe 4 or 5 visits, of his top 30. Houston was the first. And he'd said, when he was here, it just felt like home immediately. It felt different. There was a good energy about it. And him and D'Amico hit it off right away, which I thought was really interesting because D'Amico got his guy, but maybe Anderson got the right organization for him, if that makes sense. Here's a guy who months ago, Robert, we were talking about, maybe arguably the best player period in this entire draft, and the Texans got him. You're really talking about, and it could lend itself out to be true, time will only tell, but maybe the Texans got 2 of the very best players in this draft. We'll have to see.
A couple of things come to mind as we start this show that I didn't get a chance to get into in the last show. We didn't know the full compensation for Will Anderson. And when I say that, we didn't know that the first round pick that the Texans were giving up next year is their own first round pick. I just assumed it would have been the Browns' first round pick. So that's a little bit scarier than I thought. I thought, oh, it's the Browns pick, definitely middle of first round, maybe even later than that, depending on how Deshaun Watson does with the Browns next year. I don't really know the full picture. I mean, I don't know if any of us know the full picture of who the Texans were bidding against for Will Anderson with that third pick, but it sounds like the Falcons potentially were a team that was looking to maybe move up, because the one thing you thought about as you watched the draft unfold, and we didn't know this when you and I talked yesterday, Will Levis, he doesn't go till late. In other words, the second round. So
33.
there was nobody you were fighting against with Will Levis. So it was basically Anthony Richardson, and that's all. And, I guess the Falcons were maybe trying to move up for Will Anderson. So was the draft compensation a little bit steep for that? Yeah, I think so. I mean, if he hits, nobody's going to care about this in a few years. It's not going to matter. But the one thing the one problem I had with it is I didn't understand why they had to give up that high second round pick. I understand the first and third next year. I didn't feel like moving down a few spots in this draft, especially considering that, this draft is not that good of a draft at the top anyway, was worth all that the Texans gave up. But like I said, if it works out, it doesn't matter.
I saw all of the various grades, of that trade, and it looks absolutely horrible, from a Texans standpoint, that they just got raked over the coals by Arizona in making that move. But at the end of the day, you can choose to look at it however you want. Did the Texans believe in these 2 guys that they got? The answer is obviously yes. We can't talk about anything in the future. And, it's only going to make sense. There's only going to be more context to it where we can really have an intelligent conversation in whether or not it was worth it. I mean, you just mentioned it. Is it ever going to be worth it? I mean, yeah, he has to perform. Will Anderson has to perform. CJ Stroud has to perform, because you and I had this conversation last night. It's not really about trading up for Will Anderson. It's really about trading up for both of these guys, because there was something going on here with, a battle with Indianapolis and maybe Tennessee. Who knows? Maybe there was another team. We typically learn about these things after the draft anyway, if at all. But if the Texans take Will Anderson at 2 and then trade up for Stroud, the ask is totally different on behalf of Arizona. But this is just my belief. I don't even think it got to that. Nick Caserio, while he doesn't say much of anything typically in a press conference setting, did mention in his opening remarks last night that, hey, there were previous conversations leading up to the draft about movement. He didn't mention a team specifically. I didn't have a chance to ask him that. I would have presumed it's Arizona for these reasons. One,
Or you mean the Falcons, not Arizona? You mean the Falcons?
no, I mean
right?
Arizona. Arizona. I'm talking about moving up from 12 to 3 with Arizona.
I'm wondering, like, which team are you talking about moving up?
Talking about last night for Anderson. You moved up with Arizona.
But you're battling. What I'm asking is you're battling against the Falcons is all I've heard. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I don't know who they were battling against. I think they were battling against Indianapolis and Tennessee, because again, I don't think it was about Anderson. I don't think you were battling for Anderson at all. I think you made this agreement, wink, nod, handshake sort of a deal before last night. I don't think it was as organic as they want you to believe that it was. Monty Ossenfort's the general manager for the Arizona Cardinals right now. He was supposed to be the guy here if they couldn't nab Caserio. Those two guys have worked together before. They have a relationship, probably a pretty good working one as well. That deal, the way it transpired last night, really kind of reminded me about the draft night deal with the Houston Texans and Cleveland Browns when the Texans moved up to, 12 to nab Deshaun Watson. Who was the general manager for the Cleveland Browns at the time? Wasn't it Sashi Brown and Rick Smith? Those two guys had a previous relationship, good working relationship. That was almost as good as done. And that's how things get done sometimes. And I think when you want to be in a certain position, you have to make something happen. You have that relationship. You have to just go beyond what anybody else is willing to do. Sure, the trade looks like absolute crap right now in terms of like value and whatever the the context is for how they grade these things. I don't care about that. That's just based on what you're valuing these players to be right now. You don't know what Will Anderson's going to turn into. And really, you don't know what this tandem is going to turn into. I know what it should, where a guy's taking number 2 at a quarterback and number 3 a cornerstone piece as an edge rusher. They should be perennial Pro Bowlers. They should be guys that absolutely keep you in consistent competition to win your division.
You keep saying, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, because I keep getting from you that you're saying that the Texans traded up to get both of them. But the reality is the Texans were at 2. They drafted CJ Stroud. They traded up for Will Anderson, not CJ Stroud. Now, I don't know if you're talking about the trade was for both of them because we're trying to appease both Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, because that's the word that leaked out, that Nick Caserio wanted CJ Stroud, that D'Amico wanted Will Anderson. So Cal McNair or somebody in ownership, maybe it was Hannah McNair, I don't know, but broke the tie by saying, let's get both of them and let's trade up for number 3. You're acting like it's both of them, but the reality is, on paper, they drafted CJ Stroud at 2. The trade was for Will Anderson.
I understand, but that's the ask. That's what it took to get both of them. If you would have taken Anderson, you're not spending anything besides your own draft pick. And if you wait, to take a quarterback later at 12, Tennessee was gearing for him. He's probably gone to Tennessee. Tennessee makes a move. Maybe Indianapolis changes their mind if Stroud is available. They don't go Anthony Richardson. Maybe they go Stroud. If you're the Texans, you have 10 minutes. You really have less than that. Caserio.
So you're saying they graded. Okay, I'm just want to get straight what you're talking about. You think they graded Will Anderson ahead of CJ Stroud, but pick CJ Stroud first because they know that would drop the value of that number 3 pick, Will Anderson. I just want to, I don't know if everybody understands exactly what you're talking about. I just want to make that clear.
Well, I think that's a excellent way to say it, but I don't know how to explain it to you any way other than the ask is completely different if you take Anderson at 2 and you try to trade up for a quarterback at 3. The ask from Arizona is completely different because they're
absolutely.
How many other teams in this draft, Robert, needed a quarterback? You're seeing it. You're looking at it right now. You see how desperate Indianapolis was to take Anthony Richardson, where they did. Maybe they wouldn't have done that if Stroud's available. You saw what the Tennessee Titans did, taking Will Levis at 33. If Stroud's available at 3, what kind of play do they make with Arizona? You don't know. You have 10 minutes. You have less than that. Casero did a great job of breaking this down. You're going to make an offer. There's no time for any back and forth, any real back and forth. No.
We get it. I mean, obviously they had an offer in place. They had done the framework. They had talked to him in advance. All that stuff is, there's not time to do that. I get all that.
If you're the Texans, you're not playing that game. You had an idea of, what you were going to do, what line you couldn't cross. And that's why I think, a previous relationship, was invaluable to get a deal done like the Texans made with Austin Fort and the Cardinals last night. It's something that made sense for the Cardinals, and it's something that made absolute sense for the Houston Texans. Look, you could call it historic. You could call it stupid. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's about having conviction and belief in your guys. And if any organization that in recent memory had the ability to way overpay and step well out of bounds to make a deal happen, it's the Houston Texans. People are acting like they mortgaged, the future of this franchise with this deal last night. You still have 9 or 10 picks next year. You still have your own, the Cleveland Browns first, which I don't know what the disparity is going to end up being. But if you ask me again to my head, my guess is somewhere between, 6 to 8 picks, the disparity between where the Texans could pick next year and the Cleveland Browns could pick next year, just right now. I don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah. We'll see. You're going to have a rookie quarterback next year. How many games are you going to win with a rookie quarterback? And it just depends on if we see the Deshaun of old or we see the Deshaun that we saw last year. Because, one thing that the Texans have an advantage over Cleveland next year, this division is going to be much worse than the Browns. The Browns are in a much tougher division. The Lamar Jackson news, them sending him to a new contract, them getting another wide receiver, all of that you look at, and that division is going to be tough with, you've already got the Bengals there, the Steelers, are the Steelers that they're usually pretty solid and probably improving next year with their quarterback getting a little bit more mature. The other thing that, I don't know if we talked about last night, but Will Anderson, you talk about the player, but Sean, we didn't talk. I don't know if we talked about the fact that this is somebody that's going to help in the locker room. D'Amico Ryans, when he came in, he was a leader in the locker room. This defense needs a leader. They need a leader. Derek Stingley is not a leader. Jalen Petrie, I don't know if Jalen Petrie is a leader. This team badly needs a leader on defense, and that's what Will Anderson brings. And I think that's why they put as much value into him as they did, because they think this is kind of a game changer for the culture of the team.
The Texans, you kind of forget, and it's because we don't know these guys. We really haven't spent any time at all with them. We haven't talked to them, but the Texans have brought a lot of veterans in that do have those leadership qualities. And the number one guy that comes to mind that's going to be in the secondary with Jalen Petrie is Jimmy Ward. But here's where it's important about Will Anderson. Will Anderson, we've constantly heard the comparisons between him and D'Amico Ryans in terms of mindset, in just how they approach the game, how they approach their craft, and how they command a huddle. There's a story that D'Amico's even recounted since he's been hired as the Texans head coach. When he was a rookie and he came in, I think actually J.J. Watt, upon his retirement, or it was actually when D'Amico got hired, told this story. It was like when D'Amico was a rookie, he just commanded a huddle. They started calling him coach at a super young age. And that's the kind of respect that he just naturally obtained because of the way he handled his business and with the seriousness that he approached the game. Will Anderson handles it much the same way. That's why these guys hit it off. I mean, that's not smoke and mirrors. That's not blowing smoke. I mean, that's just the way that it is. I mean, you're talking about an investment. You're talking about hiring somebody for millions of dollars, and it's not a 5-year window to see if he works out. No, they're expecting this guy to come in and be an impact player right away. That's why you take him where you do, and that's who he's supposed to be. And just watch him play. Forget about the stats. Just watch the guy play. He's disruptive. So I think in that regard, he's got a lot of guys. A linebacker core. I mentioned Jerry Hughes, Malik Collins on the D line with him. Guys in the secondary. A former player that is now a head coach in D'Amico Ryans. All of these guys to learn and pull from, but that can help him naturally kind of develop into the leader that this team needs. And coming in, the way that they did together, CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, going 2 and 3 back to back, you could see the chemistry, the camaraderie that those two guys, but also the brevity that they bring with them. Even though D'Amico's going to try his best, and Nick, I think last night, if anything was evident in his press conference, tried to do this is kind of tamp down the amount of pressure that they might feel. That's innate. They should feel it.
What do you mean brevity? What do you mean by brevity? Describe what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I've even written about it, talking about these two guys as cornerstone pieces. I mean, that's a heavy thing. Like, you're talking about, like, man, I'm coming into an NFL team and just the weight of the world feeling like that's on my shoulders to be a dude right out of the gate, whether you're Stroud, whether you're Anderson, whoever. The fact that D'Amico, and he's been consistent in this, and Caserio as well, you got to give him his props, have really done their best to kind of tamp down the expectations before their names were even called. But then even doubled down on it last night and at the press conference today. And just letting him know that, you know what, we don't need you to be anybody, but just be the best version of Will Anderson you can be. Just be the best version of CJ Stroud that you can be.
Yeah.
And, Caserio said it last night, and people took it one way, and I just didn't. You can extrapolate this out and talk about your little conspiracy theories all you want to, but, CJ Stroud, he's got a long way to go. Well, some people took that and were like, well, maybe Caserio.
What are they saying? You're going to have to tell me what they're saying, because I don't know what they're saying.
I'm about to tell you.
Yeah. Tell me what they're saying.
I'm about to tell you. People are saying that, Caserio's saying, Stroud's got a long way to go. Maybe he didn't want Stroud all along. Maybe this was strictly an ownership decision that, felt like this was a moment in time where they needed to cater to the fan base, and taking a quarterback in this draft class wasn't the best decision for the organization outside of just trying to reinvigorate it from having it been on life support the last 3 years. And I just don't buy into that at all. I buy into the fact
that people think that D'Amico doesn't like Stroud. Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say D'Amico, but I said Caserio. Maybe that wasn't his guy.
No, the rumor that I had heard was that Caserio wanted Stroud and D'Amico wanted Will Anderson. That's what I had heard.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we've heard it all. It's been it's been 24 hours. I mean, you're going to hear all kinds of things. I can't tell you honestly that I've actually heard that. I'm just telling you the conversations that I've been a part of and have listened to over the course of the last 24 hours. Hell, even just 2 hours after the fact, people are on these podcasts talking this mess, and I just don't buy it.
Yeah, I'm just like I'm having you clarify it, because I'm not assuming everybody is listening to every podcast and every Twitter, whatever. Like, because it's just I don't like the whole people say, like, who are we talking about? Is it, like, who's saying it? I don't know. What I do know is that the rumor was that this is the rumor that Stroud was a Nick Caserio pick and D'Amico wanted Will Anderson. And so they split the apple and we got both of them. But let's talk about the 3rd round picks, because we got that news tonight, and they began by trading up to get the center that we said they needed. Sean, they put a couple of picks towards moving up into the 2nd round. They get Juice Scruggs. What did you think about that?
I thought the Texans addressed their biggest need going into tonight. They got their edge rusher, they got their quarterback last night. I think a lot of people thought they might go wide receiver with the first pick, but it just kind of depended on the run at the center position. And, by the time It got close to the Texans picking two centers that already dropped off the board. Two, I think, of the top 3 or 4 were highly graded coming into this draft. Scruggs maybe wasn't a guy that was on a lot of people's radar because he doesn't necessarily, fit the type of system that I think a lot of people thought, maybe was coming over with Bobby Slowick. You don't know how closely it's going to resemble Shanahan's offense in San Francisco. But everything that I've read and heard, John Harris has talked about this a little bit this evening on Texans radio, is that this guy is extremely versatile and quick laterally, which if you're going to implore, a little bit of the outside zone and inside zone scheme with this offensive line, he's the perfect fit then if you're going to do that because of his extreme athleticism. He's typical size, I think, 6'3", 304, 305, whatever it is for the center position. They're all generally around the same. But he's a little better suited, I think, for what we all believe Slowick and this offense are going to do here over Scott Quessenberry or Jimmy Morrissey, actually, the guy moves pretty well, but I mean, he is nowhere near the beast of a lineman that Juice Scruggs is.
He better be better than Quesenberry and Morrissey. He picked him in the second round, and you're picking this guy for a long-term answer at center. He also plays some guard.
He slots in right now as the starter. I mean, you address
of course.
the biggest need. The offensive line is taken care of, and that's got to make you feel really good as a Houston Texans fan with your bookend tackles and the guard positions. If you asked me right now, if you asked anybody, who are you most nervous about? Probably the guy that the least you wouldn't say, which is Juice Scruggs. You'd still probably say Kenyon Green because you've seen him a little bit. You saw him struggle. Yet, even though you saw him take some steps and he had some good moments last year, you do worry about the injury. You do worry about the body type. You do worry about, the technique a little bit. And I think all of that's fair. But you also have to keep in mind, too, with a horrid coaching staff last year, and God knows what they were really asking these guys to do out of their element. They were tanking. They weren't trying to win games. They looked like a completely different team from the things that we saw in the preseason to the regular season. And how many times did you see Kenyon Green pull during the regular season? Not much, but when you did during the preseason, the guy was extremely quick, extremely powerful when he got up and out of his stance and he was on the move. So maybe you see a little bit more of that this year, and he's better suited to be in this offensive system with Slowick. But I think you did what you absolutely needed to do with that first move tonight, another trade and getting up and getting your guy at center and Juice Scruggs. Hopefully he's here for a long time.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I think tanking would mean, you're not trying to put a good product on the field. I think Caserio was trying. They just didn't have the guys. There's a difference between what the Rockets did, which I think was more officially tanking, which is like they didn't go out and get veterans, whereas the Texans got veterans, but they, between what they could spend money wise and just, they didn't have studs there. So, and number two, I disagree with you that this was an atrocious coaching staff. There were some guys on it that were bad, but Warhop, the offensive line coach, the guy had been around the NFL for 25 years. He was a veteran offensive line coach. So I don't know how much better Kenyon Green. I think it had more to do with Kenyon Green coming in late, having the injury issues, really not getting time to develop. And he wasn't going to be a good pass blocker to begin with. And he was a lot worse than that. That's the big concern, is his pass blocking. And that's the biggest concern on the Texans offensive line, is to just get that pass blocking straight, because you got a rookie quarterback now in CJ Stroud. And, we'll see if CJ Stroud can get a good offensive line in front of him, because I think that's going to be probably the biggest thing for his development. If this offensive line can come together and be better than some of the offensive lines that we've seen recently, pass blocking, not concerned as much about run blocking, but pass blocking, then it's going to make a huge difference for him.
Right. I mean, we get split hairs, but it's one thing, you could be a really good offensive line coach, but ultimately it's what your head coach, your offensive coordinator wants you to do with your guys. And you don't know what kind of battles they were having. That's neither here nor there, though. I mean, I'm just glad that era of Texan football is over with. The Texans, Nick Caserio, believed enough in a guy like Kenyon Green to take him where he did. And you could learn from a lot worse of a guy next to you at left tackle than Laramie Tunsil. So I know they value their relationship. You could just tell being there every single day in the locker room, how they played off of each other. And I think Kenyon is going to take a big step forward this year if he's healthy. Heard some good things already about what the body is doing, what he's doing for his body this offseason. So hopefully that continues to be the case and it lends itself out. And the Texans offensive line, again, for what it was last year, really wasn't bad. I think it finished, towards the middle of the pack in terms of productivity when it's all graded out, said and done. And it got better this offseason. And it should have been because you knew you were going to put a rookie and a franchise quarterback behind them.
Yeah, we haven't forgotten about Tank Dell. I want to get to him in just 1 second. Just one more point I wanted to make on the Scruggs pick because they traded up a couple draft choices. This has been a thing with Caserio since he's come here. He targets guys. He likes specific guys. He's willing to not have many picks, but target the guy that he wants and give up some draft picks to get him. It's the difference to me between like you are really fall in love with the guy and you really feel like that guy's a part of your system. And it doesn't matter to you that you've got multiple picks. It's the difference between that and the philosophy of like the more picks that we've got, the better. If I miss on one guy, maybe I hit on another guy. I think analytically, and I heard Caserio say that it's a 50-50 shot in the draft. Well, it's a 50-50 shot. You want as many 50-50 shots as you can get. There are times where I like the fact that he's targeting and he's moving up. There are times where I think Caserio, I'm like, no, let's have multiple picks. And if one guy doesn't work out, maybe your next pick will work. A lot of times I want as many bites in the apple as possible, Shaun.
I can't disagree with that. I really can't. But I will say this, and I actually thought about this last night when Caserio said that a part of my question. So I was listening a little bit more intently to that. And when he says, the draft is a 50-50 proposition, it's a coin flip, I'm thinking like, you can't operate like that. You can't talk out both sides of your mouth. Because in one breath, he talks about it being a 50-50 proposition. But in the other breath, he says you have to have conviction when you make these picks. Whoever you choose, you have to be, absolutely certain that this is your guy. Okay, if you have that belief, you're not concerned with, what? Like we all talk about it. It's a 50-50 shot. It's a crapshoot. We say the same thing every year. No, a coach doesn't operate that way. A general manager doesn't operate that way. They're making those choices, franchise-altering decisions that could very well, and it happened twice, not once, but twice last night with Nick Caserio, decisions that could cost him his job. So you're not thinking 50-50. I kind of like getting paid $5 million a year, but, I could take it or leave it. No, BS. He had conviction in both of those moves. You don't take one unless you fully believe that that is the guy, particularly when you're in the situation like the organization was going into this draft. So I just don't buy that. I do agree with you that, hey, yeah, at the end of the day, because it is just that way for us. We're not out there busting our asses every day coaching these guys and trying to teach and develop. We're looking at it like a 50-50 shot. And I want as many of those as possible. However, when you're the dude and you're getting paid the big bucks, if you've got the conviction that, this is as close to a can't miss guy as possible, you can mortgage, future draft capital to go get a dude or two.
I should also mention, because I don't think we mentioned last night, you're not in your typical location. You're over at Sports Radio 610. So that's why everybody's seeing in the background what they're seeing, that you guys.
You like my girl? You like my girlfriend?
Oh, yeah. I know you hated the Texans drafted a Houston Cougars star, Tank Dell. You don't want any Houston Cougars stars on the Texans, right, Shaun? It's terrible. Tank Dell.
Man, I did not think that was going to happen, to be honest, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, the first
Whose
wide
house?
receiver, Cook's house, baby. The first wide receiver off the board that I figured the Texans were going to take was at least going to surpass 5'11". I thought he might get 6 foot and spikes on concrete or something, not 5'8", 165 Tank Dell. But I mean, hey, I'll take it. I heard John Harris tell a story this evening right after the pick was made and the Texans moved up to get him, that he was on a football field earlier this offseason with Dana Holgerson, and Holgerson stopped Harris and said, "That guy right there is the most explosive player I've ever coached." And Harris is like, "Him? That kid?" Harris is like, "What is he, like 5'4"? And Holgerson's like, "No, you just watch." And so they watched him work out, and Harris was like, "Holy smokes." And I mean, just go look at his numbers. Go look at what he did. I mean, the guy is just incredible. I mean, corners didn't know what to do with him. He's an extremely gifted athlete, super quick, fast, can stop on a dime. I think
Tell people his weight again, because this is like, we're talking
165
about
pounds.
This is one of the smallest guys that ever has been drafted, period. 165. That is not much. I mean, Sean,
Yeah.
they're going to have to figure out how to get weight on him. And the guy's been living in Houston for the last few years with the ability to go to Houston restaurants. And we haven't put any weight on him yet, Sean. What's the deal?
Oh, it's one of the things he said he liked most about being able to stay in Houston is the food. Of course, who wouldn't say that? You ain't going to put any weight on this guy. He's already tough as nails. He's proven that out, during his career at the University of Houston. The way he plays, the numbers that he's put up, the confidence that he plays with. I mean, he's a lay it all on the line type of guy.
There's a difference, though, in getting hit by college guys.
100%. You're right.
And
it's AAC. They ain't in the Big 12 yet. They ain't in the SEC. We can't talk about hey, he's getting hit by those guys. I mean, you're right, but it is what it is. Like, you see the value in a guy, and maybe it's more of a return guy. I don't know. Maybe it's more of a quirky little slot guy or somebody else they have in the backfield. Who knows what Bobby Slowick and that offense has got cooked up. I just know this. Everything that dude possesses athletically, about 99% of it, you just can't coach. It's just God-given. And if I'm the Houston Texans and he was there for the taking, then I'm going to make sure that I get a chance to use all of that God-given ability that I can, not anybody else. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you know what? You took your shot. There's your 50-50 proposition right there. But the dude's dynamic. I'm glad they got him. I still wish they would have gotten a bigger wide receiver. But, I mean, there's only so much you could do. They addressed the major positions of need. I was just looking at the depth chart, man, and you're going from left to right, from your X to your Z receiver and Collins and Noah Brown and Robert Woods. You got Dalton Schultz at tight end this year, and you factor in John Mechie. He's kind of like icing on the cake because you don't know what you can really should expect from, the former second round pick. And now you add Tank Dell to the equation. I haven't even gotten to Amani Rodgers yet and see what he can do for this team. But I'm kind of excited about this receiver core and this offense already, particularly because you've solidified this offensive line, at least on paper.
Well, a couple of things that I'm thinking about. Number one, speed kills. Look, I mean, you watch the Chiefs and they just put fast guys all over the field, guys with explosion, guys that are great in space. And it's one of the things that makes their offense so special. But my second thought, Sean, is it feels like Tank Dell's a little bit of John Mechie insurance, a little slot insurance. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, maybe. And I don't think that's a bad move. That's a bad idea at all. Insurance, call it what you will. Look, at the end of the day, it's a business. It's football. You hope he, comes back and has completely beaten cancer and he never has to worry about this again in his life. But what's done is done. His future, quite possibly has been affected. Maybe not with this decision by the Texans directly, but he's going to have some competition in the room now, and that's not a bad thing. And I guarantee you, a guy coming from Alabama is pretty damn used to having some competition in the room and having to go out there and fight for his lunch every single day. So for that reason, I'm really looking forward to training camp, that much more so. So I'm excited about that. the idea that, you say speed kills, it's what you do with the speed and the position that you put it in. What San Francisco's been doing the last couple of years, and I think specifically really last season, they use more pre-snap motion than most other teams in the NFL. And you mentioned a team like Kansas City. They've been the same way over the course of the last, really 5 years since the arrival of Patrick Mahomes. And when you have this, diverse athleticism, the big body types like a Dalton Schultz who could block, who can run, who could catch, who could do all these things. And whatever you think Nico Collins can turn into with a proven veteran in Robert Woods and Noah Brown, too, who showed some special things last year with the Cowboys. You add Mechie in, you add Tank Dell into the equation with this athletic offensive line now. I'm really expecting the Texans to be everything that, Pep Hamilton said his offense was going to be, but actually come to fruition this year.
Yeah, I was about to say, when you were talking about all that pre-snap movement, I was like, this doesn't sound like Pep Hamilton at all. This is kind of fun. I've been looking forward to see that with the Texans for years. And
yeah.
I was watching Bill O'Brien's offense that looked like it was at times looked like in the Stone Age. And, I'm just excited to see an offense with a little bit of movement and all that sort of stuff. But, let's just talk about the draft to close things out. Just like big picture. Look, if you're a Texans fan, this offseason couldn't have gone better. You got your quarterback. You got a head coach that you're excited about. You got a pass rusher that's the best guy maybe in this draft. So, by most experts is the best guy in this draft, at least the most consistently good guy in this draft. You've got a wide receiver out of the University of Houston that you can root for. You got a center. You filled that need. You basically got all the needs. The only thing that I've missed, Sean, and what we thought maybe they'd get a defensive tackle in the first 3 rounds. But once that second round pick was gone, I thought, there was going to be something that they couldn't address. And the other thing I thought it would happen in the 3rd round. We'll see what they do on day 3, but I thought they would address linebacker. They went with Tank Dell instead of linebacker. Yeah. That's about the only, and it's a minor complaint. It's about the only complaint that I have from the first 3 rounds. But, if you're a Texans fan, I mean, you got to be excited. Are these guys any good? We'll find out. I mean, that's the only thing, you could say this, we wanted this guy. I like this guy. I love this guy. And then if they all fall in their face, they're like, I'm mad about this pick and that pick, and I don't like that. But everybody, as we sit here, I think everybody's pretty excited about pretty much every one of those guys. Juice Scruggs is the only guy that I think Texans fans are just not sure of, but they need a center. If he's the center and he works out, that's it.
And who'd you want? Like all of the people that are like Scruggs, like all you fake scouts out there that, say you should have got this guy or that guy. I mean, you don't know a damn thing. I just look at it from this point. Like I'm not a draft expert. I try my best to study up on all of these guys. Just the simple fact that they address the positions of need. And you do go look at a guy like Scruggs. Look, he was a top 5, player at his position coming into the draft, and you moved up to get him. They had conviction to do that, so you should feel pretty good about it. The same thing with Tank Dell. He was a top 100 player, coming into this draft, and you traded up to get him. He's dynamic. I mean, how many of those guys do you see, in the NFL every year? You don't. I mean, I don't care about his size. But could you imagine this, though, if the Texans would have gotten Bryce Young and then drafted Tank Dell? It's like, what are we trying to trot out here? Like some JV high school football team? Like, come on, can we get some men? Can you imagine how badly the Texans would be getting crushed for taking like all of these wee men offensively? I'm glad we don't have to worry about that. But at the end of the day, I think the Texans have done a good job of addressing major positions of need. Now, whether or not they do a darn thing at the next level, I mean, that's months and years away. But I'm with you. I would have liked to have seen a linebacker at this point. And Nick Caserio is a little bit lighter in the pocket now going into day 3 than he certainly was coming into today with 10 total picks before moving up to take Juice Scruggs. They can still address that. I don't know how deep the linebacker position group still is in this draft. I don't know how deep interior defensive line still is in this draft. And if there are guys still sitting there available for Caserio, he's still got some bullets in the chamber where if he needs to move up a little bit in the 4th round, maybe he makes it happen there. But beyond that, that's kind of when, I start tuning out, because they become stories. If they're going to do something special, if they pop in training camp or they pop in the preseason, or all of a sudden they're playing integral roles for a team in the regular season and you're a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, I'll write a story about you. I'll start paying a little bit more closer attention. Might even learn your name. But outside of that, early day tomorrow, what do you need to see them? What do you need to see in the draft?
We're going to continue the conversation on Monday, because I know a lot of people aren't going to be even able to hear this until after tomorrow's already started. I don't want to get too much into that, because by the time this thing drops, they're going to have done that. But we're going to get into what they did on Saturday. On Monday, we're going to have some Rockets conversation this weekend, planning to do that as well. Look for a special Rockets podcast coming up on Ime Udoka and what's going on over at the Toyota Center. But great stuff, Shaun. Just can't be more excited about what the Texans have done. I'm ready to play some football after all this, man.
Oh, you got to wait longer. But yeah, I'm kind of with you there, man. It's going to be fun. They've got the names. They got the dudes that, has breathed hope and life back into the fan base. And that's what it so desperately needed. That's what I needed.
What do you think, guys? Get in the comments. Everybody out there, we want to hear from you. We'll talk to you again later this weekend, but have a great one.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.